Welcome everyone. In this video, what we're going to look at are some of the things you can do once you've installed Suricata. So if you haven't gotten to that point, there's a couple of videos that I would recommend that you watch already in our YouTube channel. The first is how to install Suricata, and the second is how you can ensure that you have a current rule set using Suricata Update. So definitely check those out. I'll provide some links in the description in this video. So in this video, what we're going to do then is we're going to explore some of the next steps. After you have Suricata installed, after you have the rules updated, what can you do? And one of the primary things you want to do is to start to ensure that, one, it is generating the data that you want. It's generating protocol data, it's generating alerts, and then how you can actually use that data. So we're going to set up EveBox to work with an SQLite database in order to provide some very basic and straightforward alert management. If you decide to follow along with any portion of this video and you run into any trouble, don't hesitate to reach out for help. You can find a great resource at forum.suricata.io. Also, because I've already covered some of the installation in previous videos, we're not going to get into all of the steps required there. But before we get too far into this demo, I did want to point out that it is important that you did follow along with the installation, particularly with the permissions. That if you run into any permission errors while working through this video, this demonstration, then these are a good resource to just go back and check and make sure that you have all your permissions squared away. So here you can see that some of the relevant steps for ensuring that you have your permissions set up properly are going to come under section 10.5, dropping privileges after setup. And this is coming from the suricata.readthedocs.io, which is where the latest documentation for running Suri is located. Okay, so we can confirm that we have Suricata installed and running by running the suricata space tac-v command, capital V. This will tell us the latest version, or at least the version of a Suricata that we have installed. So at the time of this recording, I have version 6.0.1 release. Now, I don't have Suricata running right now, listening for live network traffic. That is one of the modes, probably one of the primary modes in which you can run Suricata. Instead, I want to let's say we still want to test. We want to get a feel for how Suricata works. We want to get a sense of the data that it produces, and we're still maybe doing some experimentation. Another mode that is available to you is offline mode, which is a mode that's available in order to run PCAPs. So Suricata you can provide it a PCAP, either a specific file, a PCAP file, or a directory of PCAPs, and it will essentially replay those, processing that PCAP, generating the same protocol data, generating the same alerts. So this becomes very handy when you're doing threat hunting, for doing malware analysis. A lot of sandboxes capture network traffic during analysis, provide that PCAP to Suri after it's done in order to generate the alerts. Some of them will do it in real time, so those alerts are generated as the analysis is unraveling. It also provides you the ability to take network captures from your environment and then replay those in a standalone sensor and see what kind of data it generates, what kind of alerts are there, or maybe do some proactive threat hunting. In any case, this is the mode that we're going to be using in this demonstration. In order to help facilitate that, what I have created, and again, I'll provide links to all of these resources in the description of this video. I've created a script that allows you to ingest the PCAP. So if you want to grab this script, it's here in the description below. And what this script will do is just a couple of very basic things. First, it checks to make sure that you're running the script as the sudo or root user. It then ensures that you did provide, in fact, an argument, which is a path to a PCAP file. It doesn't confirm that you provide an actual PCAP, it confirms that you, in fact, provided a path to a legitimate file. The next thing it does is a little bit of cleanup, and it's going to essentially, with this echo statement, delete all of the contents in the eve.json. Now, eve.json is the primary output file for Suricata. This is the default location var log Suricata. So every time you run this script, it removes all of the data from any previous executions. And the reason that we're doing this is just so that we can focus only on the traffic that was contained within that PCAP. Next comes Suricata. And the Suricata command, we'll just focus here on the important parts. We have the -r with the $1. $1 represents the argument when we executed the script, which is the path to our PCAP file. So that's telling Suricata to load, but load in offline mode. And then once the engine has loaded and initialized, look for that PCAP file and go ahead and process that traffic. -K just tells it to ignore checksums. That's more of an issue with some of the different NIC or hardware vendors out there, and just how checksums are computed. You can go down a rabbit hole if you're interested in that. If you are working with Suri in production, you likely have already. We also have the default configuration file. We're just telling Suri where to look for the configuration file with the -C argument. etc suricata.yaml is where that exists. And then you'll notice that one of the reasons I pointed out the permissions at the beginning is that we can tell Suricata to drop permissions once it's initialized. And that way it's running in a, you could say a more secure mode, because we can restrict the privileges rather than running it as the root user. So we can do that with --group or --user. You may have to make a few changes based off of your environment and how you're running. If you're just testing and you really don't care, the easiest thing to do then is to run this command as the root user, which this will do because the script requires it, and simply delete this section right here. Just ignore it. Okay, the last thing it does is it uses JQ, which is a utility to query JSON files. If you don't have this installed, it's pretty straightforward. In Ubuntu, you can use apt-get install JQ, and I'm would suspect on many other distros it's quite as similar, using the package manager. And we're going to look at getting the event type of alert out of the eve.json file, typing that to JQ, and then just getting out some of the important pieces to display here. So we'll see if any alerts were generated. They'll be here in the output of our terminal once we've run this script. Okay, so that's what our script will do. So you don't need a script to do all of this. It just makes things a lot easier. Where do we get PCAP files? Well, any number of places you can go. I'm going to provide, or I do provide, a number of samples available on a GitHub. So if you just search for my name, Josh Stroshine or J Strosh, I have this repository called malware samples. Example, let's see here. This is probably a good one. You'll notice that there are a number of artifacts here. There's the original malicious artifact, in this case an Excel or I guess it was a Word document. We have the PCAP file, and then any other kind of intermediary artifacts that get left behind. We're just worried about PCAPs, so there is a PCAP here that you can download. And probably more importantly, we want to have a PCAP that we know is going to generate some Suricata alerts, because that's what that script is focused on, is just looking at the alerts. Suricata can do far more than just generate alerts. It can generate all the protocol data, TLS certificate information, file identification. It can do a lot. But right now, usually getting it to generate alerts is one of the easiest things to do, just to make sure that everything is working as expected. Another very popular, I'm sure a much more popular site is Malware Traffic Analysis by Brad Duncan. Very similarly, I post very similarly to him, and that you can select any one of these different events that he's posted about. You'll be able to find the zip that contains the artifacts and the PCAPs, and then sometimes he will post that there are alerts here or not. Now, I already have the PCAP downloaded to the desktop, and if you are downloading that script in order to execute or ingest those PCAPs, you do want to make sure that it has execute permissions. So an easy way to do that is just to say chmod +x, that gives it the execute bit, the script, and now you're ready to execute. If it's not executable, then the system will complain that what you're telling it to do is not something that it can execute. After that, we're ready to ingest the script. So we're going to use sudo // to tell the operating system to look in the current directory. So I have this script saved to my desktop. You can see I'm in my desktop right now in the terminal. And then the one argument is the path, relative or absolute, whichever you prefer, to the PCAP itself. So this was just the original name of the PCAP as I downloaded it. Now, from here, the main output that you'll see is output from Suricata itself. So this is Suricata initializing the engine. It's also going to load a rule set. So if you haven't loaded a rule set, it will complain. It'll tell you there are no rules to load, and you told me to load rules. And so you'll need to resolve that, which we did in a previous video where we discussed Suricata update. You also want to pay attention because if there are any problems with your setup at this point in time, you're going to see that output here. You would see something typically in red. Normally you would see warning or error messages that would indicate you have something wrong with your setup. So you can see I don't have any red, so I have this setup, looks like is pretty good. In addition now, because we ran this PCAP with the script, and recall that script used JQ in order to query the eve.json file for alerts, we do have a number of alerts here. So these are just alerts from that JSON file. You can see we have a PEXE or DLL download. We have an executable retrieved with minimal HTTP headers. We have is debugger present, and then we have a couple of JA3. So we're not going to get into what the alerts mean. We'll save that for a future video. We just need to, or really just want to confirm that we do have alerts, because now when we install EveBox, we'll see those right away in that inbox. So it looks like we're ready to move on to EveBox. Okay, with EveBox, this is a project that is developed by one of the core Suricata developers, Jason Ish. You can go to evebox.org and find installation instructions and downloads, as well as issues in the documents and documentation. So it's up to you as to what you're specifically looking for here. What I want to do though is just grab the downloads. So we can go to the downloads link down here at the very bottom, latest development builds. I'm just going to go ahead and open this in a new tab. I don't actually want a development build, so I'm going to go back a directory to the releases folder, and then we'll grab the latest release. So here you can see there's a folder called latest, and then there's a number of options here. For this video, I found it just as easy to grab the .deb file. So go ahead, you can click that. You'll be asked to download it, save that to your file system somewhere. And now we're ready for installation. To install, we can use the command sudo dpkg-i and then the path to that deb file. So again, I moved this to my desktop before I started recording just to make things a little bit easier here. Now we can run that command and EveBox is ready to go. It's installed. What we do next though is we have to determine how we want to run EveBox. So if we go back to the docs, so back to the evebox.org page, and then we go to that docs link, it'll tell you steps about the installation. It'll talk about the Selks distro, which has EveBox already installed. So you can check out Selks if you want. That's a distribution that we'll talk about in a future video. And then we'll have a couple of options for how we want to start and use EveBox. Now, a very popular or prevalent way of doing that is to just to integrate it with Elastic. So we would have, in that scenario, we would have EveBox, or I'm sorry, we'd have Suricata running. Suricata would have all of its logs shipped, or primarily the eve.json, to an Elastic cluster, and then we would just point EveBox to that Elastic cluster. Now, in this scenario, because we just installed Suricata, we haven't gone that extra step of setting up an Elastic cluster and shipping the eve.json data to Elastic. So right now, we just have everything running locally. So we have another option. We don't have to use Elastic, at least we don't have to use it right away, especially if we're just exploring. We can actually just use an embedded SQLite database. So here's the command. We can, because we're doing everything by default, we can just copy that, go back to our terminal, we'll paste this in and hit enter. Again, if all goes well, then what we should see is essentially no errors, and because we didn't send this process to run in the background or anything, it's just going to hang here, and it's going to let us know. Let's see here, that the server is running on our local host on port 5636 by default. And that's all in the documentation as well. So I would encourage you to spend a little bit more time there to see what else is possible. If you want to change the port, if you need to bind to a different IP address, if you want to use TLS, many, many different options. From there, we can go ahead and we can open up another tab in our browser. And we just need to navigate to localhost 5636. And now we have the EveBox primary interface. Now you'll see we certainly had, if we go back to our, I guess I cleared it, I can't do that. We know that when we ran the script, we had alerts that were generated. we don't see any alerts right now. And that's the default behavior. The only behavior for the inbox is to display alerts. So one thing to keep in mind is that when we replay those PCAPs, when we process those PCAPs using Suricata, it's going to use the timestamp that traffic was initially captured. So if that PCAP was from a week ago or a month ago or 2 years ago, it's not going to show up because right now this interface is only filtering for the last 24 hours. So we can select all or whatever time frame was relevant. And now you'll see that we do in fact have those alerts that we saw after running the script. And we have basic information about those here: the timestamp, the source to destination, the signature, and a little tag that would indicate the protocol that was that the alert was corresponding to. So this was an alert that had to do with TLS traffic. This is an alert that was generated based off of HTTP traffic. As I said, we'll get into in another video all of the how to use EveBox, all the ins and outs of it. But for right now, this is just one of the best ways to get up and running and working with Suricata data in a graphical way. Not only do you have the inbox for your alerts, but then you also have this events tab. And with the event tab, you can see all of the different protocol data, as well as information such as file information and TLS certificate information that you could also investigate. So as I mentioned, Suricata can generate a lot of data beyond just alerts. So because we picked a PCAP that happened to generate alerts, we didn't necessarily need that, because we could still come in to a utility like EveBox, and now we can investigate all of the HTTP event types. So here we can see we have a GET request to this domain .ir TLD for a PDF file. If we select that, now we can dig in and get a little bit more information there. So again, just a tip of the iceberg as to what you can do with the data that Suricata is generating, and a tool like EveBox is a graphical way to help you with that. So we'll get into EveBox here in a future video, but for now, hopefully this gives you a lot of ideas and really helps you in order to take that next step for leveraging your usage of Suricata. Again, if you have any questions, run into any problems, want to be a bigger part of the community, whatever the case may be, don't hesitate to come over to the forums, sign up, start engaging. There are lots of great people here that are willing to help, and look forward to communicating and chatting with you. So until the next video, everyone stay safe, and talk to you then.